The hilarious history of Tetris, Cold War, a bad joke, and a little game. It's 1984. The Cold War is freezing cold. US President Ronald Reagan tests a microphone and cracks a notorious joke. My fellow Americans, I'm pleased to tell you I just signed legislation that will outlaw Russia forever. We begin bombing in 5 minutes. Oops. That remark leaks out, and in Moscow, a big red alarm immediately goes off. That about sums up the vibe. Two superpowers that trust each other about as far as they can throw a nuclear missile. For context, in 1984, America is buzzing, from Apple's Macintosh to the Los Angeles Olympics, while the Soviet Union is groaning. Economic mess, an elderly, sickly leader, and a hopeless war in Afghanistan. In short, the US is partying and the USSR has a hangover. Yet in the summer of 1984, something unexpectedly unifying happens in Moscow. Not diplomacy, not a miracle treaty, just a simple computer game. A Russian programmer invents a puzzle game that will soon conquer the world and briefly bring East and West onto the same wavelength. That game is called TETRIS. A Russian code-clunker and his puzzle. Meet Alexey Pajitnov. He's a mathematician and programmer in Moscow, born in 1956. As a kid, Alexey loved puzzles. His favorite was an old pentamino puzzle, where you have to fit 12 pieces of 5 squares each into a rectangle. You know, the kind of brain teaser that keeps you busy for hours while you're supposed to be doing homework. He also loved movies. His mother was a film journalist who smuggled him into foreign films. So little Alexey grew up with James Bond and math puzzles. A unique mix. Flash forward. Alexey graduates in applied mathematics and in the 1980s starts working at the computer center of the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Sounds fancy, but don't imagine too much. They had one computer the size of a fridge, and everyone had to wait their turn. By day, Alexey dutifully programs government projects like artificial intelligence and speech recognition. But in the evenings, when colleagues have gone home, he has that giant machine all to himself. That's when he can secretly have fun coding his own projects. He's not the only one. Colleagues stay late too, making their own games. One is obsessively recreating Pac-Man, that arcade hit that mysteriously slipped through the Soviet border. Another codes text adventures. And Alexey. In 1984, he gets an idea inspired by his favorite childhood puzzle, the birth of Tetris. One late evening, Alexey wonders, can I translate pentamino to the computer? The big mainframe can't handle fancy graphics, only text characters. Also, 12 puzzle pieces is a bit much, so he simplifies the puzzle. Instead of pieces made of 5 squares, he makes shapes of 4 squares. That gives 7 different shapes, later called tetraminos. He builds a first version. The computer gives you random shapes, and you have to neatly assemble them into a field without holes. It works, but once you solve it, that's it. Not very exciting. Alexey thinks, how do I make this more challenging? He adds movement. Blocks now fall from the top, and you have to rotate and steer them as they drop. Much better. You're under pressure. But now there's a new issue. The screen fills up fast and game over comes quickly. And when you make a full line, it just stays there. No reward. Then comes the brilliant insight. A complete row disappears as soon as it's filled. Poof, space for new blocks. This simple idea transforms the game from fun to utterly addictive. In theory, you can play forever as long as you keep making full lines. Every time a perfect line disappears, it feels amazing. Buy clutter. Hello points. Alexey himself can't stop playing. During work hours, he catches himself secretly playing Tetris and pretending he's debugging. Sure, debugging, with that glazed, block-obsessed Tetris stare. No one buys it. The game needs a name. Alexey loves tennis, and tetra is Greek for four. Combine the two and you get Tetris, a name as simple as the game. The first version is very bare bones. No levels, no sound, just pure puzzle mechanics. But that's enough. Without realizing it, Alexey has created a game the whole world could understand. Falling blocks speak every language. Underground hit in the Soviet Union. Initially, Tetris only runs on Alexey's old Electronica 60 computer. That limits the audience. He wants it on a more accessible platform, so he asks 16-year-old programmer Vadim Gerasimov for help. Vadim ports Tetris in a few weeks to the IBM PC, which is far more common, even in the USSR. The PC version has bright colors, a high-score screen, and multiple levels. Now, lots more people can play. And they do. Tetris spreads through Moscow on floppy disks like wildfire. Colleagues copy it and pass it to friends. Soon, everyone with access to a computer is playing this addictive game. Tetris becomes a hit behind the Iron Curtain without a single advertisement. A psychologist even calls Tetris a digital drug. Attempts to ban it at workplaces fail. It just keeps popping up. By 1986, Tetris is a full-blown phenomenon in the Soviet tech world. Alexey doesn't earn a cent. In the communist system, he can't. But he's proud that something he made brings people so much joy. Escape to the West. Jump to Hungary in 1986. In a computer lab in Budapest, British-Hungarian businessman Robert Stein notices people staring hypnotically at a screen. Falling blocks. He tries the game and is instantly hooked. As a software agent, he smells opportunity. This game could be gold in the West. Stein wastes no time. He gets the telex number of the Russian computer center where Alexey works and sends a message asking to buy the rights to Tetris. Alexey is stunned. A Westerner wants to publish their game. He'd love to say yes, but he's cautious. Soviet authorities are watching. He sends a polite, very non-committal reply. "We are interested in a deal." Stein reads only the enthusiasm and ignores the caution. To him, it's a done deal. Without waiting for a real contract, he shops Tetris around to Western publishers. Mirrorsoft in London, owned by media tycoon Robert Maxwell, and Spectrum Holobyte in California. At first, the bosses are skeptical. No flashy graphics, no action hero, no explosions. But once they play it, and once their employees refuse to stop playing, they realize its huge potential. Stein signs deals, still without final permission from Moscow, but he tells no one. Mirrorsoft gets European rights. Spectrum Holobyte gets the US and Japan rights for home computers. The Soviets had only mentioned IBM-PCS, but Stein gambles that no one will complain later. In early 1988, Tetris launches in America and Europe. Publishers give it a Soviet aesthetic, red boxes, Russian letters, Kremlin backgrounds, and a folk tune. Ads joke that Tetris might be a sly communist plot to reduce Western productivity. And it works. Tetris becomes instantly popular in the West. Gamers of all ages fall under its spell. Critics praise its simplicity and addictiveness. Within a year, Spectrum Holobyte sells about 100,000 copies in the US. Huge for a puzzle game. Europe follows suit. Tetris becomes the first Soviet video game commercially released in the West, causing a media splash. As the dollars start rolling in, the Soviets finally notice something's up. Elorg, an agency for electronics export, steps in. "Wait a minute. Our game is being sold in the West. Did we even approve this?" They find out Stein never finalized any contract. Time to restore order. The Soviets step in. Ilorg invites Robert Stein to Moscow in 1989 to continue negotiations. In reality, they want answers. Stein knows he jumped the gun and nervously heads to Moscow, hoping to secure the official contract and maybe snag additional rights like arcade and handheld. But Stein isn't the only one flying to Moscow in 1989. Hank Rogers smells opportunity too. Rogers, a Dutch-American publisher, brought Tetris to Japan. He got the Japanese PC version via Spectrum Holobyte, but the console version for the Famicom had been given by Mirrorsoft to Atari Games and Tengen. Rogers convinced Atari to sell him the Japanese console rights for a hefty fee. In December 1988, he released Tetris on the Famicom. Sales were modest at first, but once Nintendo brass saw how universally appealing it was, it became a 2 million unit hit. Now Hank aims higher, Nintendo's upcoming Game Boy. He convinced Nintendo that Tetris would be the perfect pack-in-game. Nintendo agrees, but only if the handheld rights are secured. And guess what Stein and Mirrorsoft are chasing too? So in March 1989, Moscow sees a parade of rivals. Robert Stein trying to save himself, Hank Rogers trying to get handheld rights for Nintendo, and Kevin Maxwell, son of Robert Maxwell, hoping Dad's Kremlin connections will help. Hank Rogers immediately impresses Ilorg. He speaks directly with Belikov and with Alexey and lays out the entire licensing mess honestly. His proposal is simple and attractive. Nintendo will pay royalties per Game Boy cartridge. Stein, meanwhile, is confronted with reality. His old contract covers only PCS, not consoles or handhelds. He is forced to accept new strict terms and ends up with only arcade rights. Kevin Maxwell embarrasses himself by mistaking an official Nintendo Tetris cartridge for a pirate copy. Perfect proof Mirrorsoft is clueless. After these meetings, Ilorg makes its decision. The most trustworthy party. Nintendo, via Hank Rogers, gets the handheld rights. Ilorg also invites Nintendo to bid on console rights. Soviets versus capitalists, the rights war. Nintendo sends top executives Minoru Arakawa and Howard Lincoln to Moscow with a $5 million offer. Mirrorsoft gets a chance to bid, but misses the deadline. In March 1989, Nintendo and Ilorg sign the contract. All console rights go to Nintendo. Stein and Mirrorsoft receive telex messages informing them their supposed console and handheld rights are invalid. Mirrorsoft and Atari Games are furious, but Stein is out of options. He's lost. Nintendo versus Atari. With official rights secured, Nintendo orders Atari Games and Tengen to stop their NES Tetris plans. Tengen refuses and releases its own Tetris cartridge in May 1989, printing an enormous stock. The games sell briskly until the court intervenes. On June 22, 1989, a U.S. judge rules that Nintendo alone holds the rights. Atari's version must be pulled immediately. Tengen is left with warehouses full of useless cartridges. They might as well throw them out. Nintendo then releases its own NES Tetris, which sells millions. In July 1989, Nintendo launches the Game Boy, with Tetris included. The combination is pure magic. The Game Boy conquers the world, and millions become addicted to Tetris on that tiny green screen. Finally, reward for the creator. The battle for Tetris ends in Nintendo's favor, and also in the Soviets, who finally earn hard currency. Almost everyone involved profits, except the creator. Alexey Pajitnov doesn't see a cent from Tetris until 1989. He is still working at the Institute and can only watch others get rich. Fortunately, things change. In 1991, after the Soviet Union collapses, Alexey moves to the United States with help from Hank Rogers. He settles near Seattle and enters the games industry. In 1995, the original licenses expire, and Alexey finally gets the chance to earn from Tetris. He and Hank form the TETRIS company. They partner with the newly privatized Elorg. From then on, Pajitnov and Rogers own half of all Tetris rights. Elorg owns the other half. Alexey finally earns royalties after more than a decade. High score. Tetris, meanwhile, becomes one of the most successful games ever. Over 170 million copies are sold on every platform imaginable, from Game Boy to smartphones. The game becomes a cultural icon, and many people know the so-called Tetris effect, seeing those blocks fall even after you stop playing. Who could have guessed in 1984 that a simple Russian puzzle game, born in the middle of the Cold War, would entertain and connect millions worldwide? Tetris succeeds where politicians fail. It briefly unites East and West, not through diplomacy, but through a shared addiction to falling blocks. And Alexey Pajitnov? He can finally look back with a smile. It took a while, but he eventually got both recognition and a piece of the fortune his creation generated. Sometimes world-changing things come from the most unexpected places. In this case, from a one-room apartment in Moscow, made by a man with a computer and a handful of falling shapes.